Welcome to the Restaurants Grow podcast, where you get tips, tricks, and tactics on how to grow your restaurant business. Today in the show we have Hamed. He's the CEO and founder of Milagro. Milagro is an all-in-one restaurant commerce platform that increases top-line revenue by simplifying operations and automating guest retention. I can't speak to how important I think guest retention is if you're going to use technology. Now, you might recognize him by his haircut or from showing off his Lamborghinis. Yes, that's plural. There is more than one at industry events. But Hamed didn't begin his professional career with either of those things. And I found this out when we started putting the show together, but it began when he was fired from his job at Best Buy. And that event inspired him to begin his journey as a technology entrepreneur with his first company, which was a low voltage business providing security systems, audio, video, and cabling. I have lots of questions about that we're not going to talk about today. But in 2010, he entered into the restaurant space, creating technology that helps restaurants with operations and with retention. Hamed loves full service dining. He loves day trading and going to the barber shop as infrequently as possible. I'm excited to have Hamed on the show today because every time I talk to him, I either learn something about technology or he inspires me to have challenger thinking. A little bit of a fun fact. Again, Hamed once got fired from Best Buy. That led to him crying in the parking lot and inspired his journey in building technology innovations. Hamed, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rav. I'm thrilled to be here. Every time, by the way, I learned the same thing. So you and I talk pretty frequently, and some of our technology decisions that we've made, some of it is contributed right to you.
Amen. I thank all of my fidget spinners from Wendy's. Okay, I want to know, what is the best restaurant experience you've had thus far this year in 2025?
Oh, I don't know. I usually don't dine out much anymore. But if I go back a few more months, actually it was in a hotel that these guys just went way above and beyond. And I was staying at the hotel, dining in at the restaurant. And the server was like, "Hey, can I get you anything else?" At the end, I'm like, "Yeah, I'd like to get one of these cakes to go." And the freaking guy filled a box with cakes and handed it to me. I'm like, "I asked for one and he gave me like 6 or 7." So anyway, that was to be noted. It was a hell of an experience, but that's probably the best experience in the last few months.
I love that. I ate at a restaurant last week where the owner actually served our table. Maybe not the most scalable of ideas, but like the things that he did at our table was amazing. Like, "Oh, here's my house-made limoncello. Oh, do you want to come back and see me slice prosciutto on this like $40,000 machine? like, oh, let me pour the olive oil on your thing." And I was like, "This is amazing." This
Yeah.
is so good. Love that. Okay, listen, you have been in the business a very long time. You've worked with large brands, growing brands, independents. I mean, literally like every business model you've worked with. What is the number one lesson you've learned out of all of this experience?
All right, I'll answer it. Actually, the answer is very simple. From personal experience growing my own companies to looking at the successful brands and everybody in between from small to large, what really matters is top line revenue. That's it. It's that simple. If that top line revenue isn't there, then there is no business. Nothing else matters. So the most important lesson that I've learned that I'm still dealing with today in one of my companies is how do I, and not in one, but in all of them, but one in specifically is how do I grow the top line revenue in order to be able to do everything else?
Go a little deeper there. Like, how does that play out? How do you think about it from a restaurant perspective?
So if we wanted to touch base on that, like literally this is what I'm doing. So if you're in a restaurant, it's a little bit easier on that side, but there's only 3 ways to grow revenue. If you really sum it down, it comes to customer acquisition, which is really difficult and expensive. Trust me, I know. There's
Me too.
yeah, well, that's the number one. CAC is a real thing. Like customer acquisition cost is that's a real metric, and it's very expensive. A lot of money is spent on just acquisition channels.
I feel like every restaurant I talk to, independent, multi-unit, full service, doesn't matter. There's like a high focus on if just more people knew about it. So if we just get more new guests, like it is like the number one thing every restaurant talks about.
And okay, so let's open that can of worm a little bit more. but they spend a ton of money on acquisition. But when it comes to retention, 70% of those customers that go into that restaurant will never go back. So from today on, just kind of look at your own restaurants that you go to and you visit. Look at the new restaurants that you go to and how often do you go back there. 70% of the time, you're not even going back to that restaurant. Now the question is, why not? Well, there's no retention strategy for that restaurant. Acquisition in restaurant industry is a little bit easier than other channels. It's not as expensive. You're not spending $500, $1,000 to get a customer. You're spending way less, an order of magnitude less to acquire customers through different channels. So acquisition is a challenge that I don't see a big problem within this space. However, when you go to the next channel, the retention side, again, 70% of those customers are just churning. They're not coming back. And I have yet to see a restaurant that actually has hammered the retention side. Like nailed it, and it's like, hey, we've got this covered. Customer comes in, there's this methodology, here's what we're doing to bring them back in, and proactively reach out to that customer. Now obviously retention comes with its own challenges, so does acquisition, but retention side is so much more manageable. They've already been there, they've already bought, they probably already like your brand. All you got to do is just nudge them a little bit. And the next important metric in retention is, like, we've looked at our own CDP data. Originally, we found the data from National Restaurant Association, and then we cross-referenced it somewhere else, and then we looked at our own CDP platform. You could see 70% drop after first visit. Then it goes down to like 20%, then it goes down to like 10%, and then it's down to like a couple of points. But when it comes to like fifth time visitors, it starts actually going back up. So it goes from 2% to 5, 6, 7%. So once you run them through the first, second, third, fourth, fifth visit, then the retention starts picking up. And that's what you want. You want a strategy, a tactic that it goes after those first timers to turn them into regulars, and we'll talk more about that. So you got customer acquisition, you got customer retention, and then the last way is to raise your prices. And I think that I don't know if the consumers are going to put up with any more price increases. They're getting hit with price increases left and right, and there is going to be a breaking point. If we haven't already crossed that bridge where you just simply can't increase prices anymore, we're pretty close to it.
I totally agree with you. I want to stay in the top line energy for a quick second here. When you think about top line revenue, are you saying it kind of doesn't matter where the money comes from? Like, it could come from a price increase, it could come from acquisition, like, as long as it's coming, right? Is that
agreed? Yeah. Well, money is money. If I take $100 bill that's from new customer versus a retention versus an upsell or price increase, they're going to accept that as a deposit. So yeah, to me, it doesn't matter where the money is coming from. What's important behind the scene is to use the one that has the highest leverage, the least barrier to maximum output. So where can I park my resources, i.e. money, people, technology, you name it, to have the most amount of upside on the other side? And obviously in business, everything's ROI. So if I put in $1, can I get $2, $5, or $10 out? So what I want to do is, I don't want to put $1 in and get $2 back. I want to put $1 in and go from the top down. So whatever is going to give me $10 back, number one thing. Then I want to attack the next one, which gives me $5 back, and then the next one that gives me $2 back.
I used to work with, this is interesting. I used to work with a very large restaurant on the Vegas Strip. So their customer retention was ridiculously low because, it's a tourist town. It's in a touristy area. Like, there's so many one-time visitors. And how do you even market to those people? We won't get into that. But I learned an important lesson working with that restaurant. Some of their guests came in the door and paid full price, right? Mm-hmm. Some of their guests came in and booked out a private room. Some of their guests came in and had a quick lunch, right? And some of their guests came from Groupon, and some of them came from referrals and whatever. And each one of those different guests had a different level of profitability, but they were all profitable. And it took all of those guests together to reach a top line revenue that worked. And so when I'd be like, man, if we really want to discount to do a Groupon thing, they were like, we got to hit this number.
It
Like,
doesn't matter how you
it
get
doesn't
there.
matter how we hit it as long as we hit it. Now, there are better ways to hit it. And for sure, we focused on the highest profitable things. But like that lesson to me was like top line revenue lesson. If you can drive it, you should do it. You know what I mean?
And actually, let's talk about discounting a little bit, because nobody wants to discount, including myself. I mean, if you can get somebody to pay full price, then why not, right? But the reality is you can't always do that. Sometimes you gotta adjust. But here's a lesson that I personally learned that has driven my decision making for the past 15 years. Once you cross a limit, typically around $1 million mark, that is the magical number. Because once you're at, let's say, 900,000, then you're making 8% margin. But once you go over a million and you go to like 1,000,001, 1,000,002, now you're not making 8%, you're making 15%. You're making 18% in net margin. Nothing really has changed. It's just the top line revenue growth. So a lot of people are complaining that, hey, I'm paying third party Uber Eats, DoorDash, etc. 30% on my revenue. That is insane. And I'm like, okay, so turn it off, right? It's like, what's the alternative is you get none of that revenue. But if you set up your restaurant right, if you set up your business right, that should be the cherry on top. That should be a revenue that is 70%. Like you're paying 30% there, you're paying 30% for food costs, and you're not having to increase your labor, your rent doesn't go up. None of your fixed cost is changing except your OpEx, which is your food cost and the delivery fee you're paying. So that's still 40% margin, because otherwise you just simply wouldn't have it. So back to your point, once you cross a certain level of revenue, even the Groupon or the Uber Eats and the DoorDashes are profitable, because you're not using that to pay your overhead. You've already covered your overhead by charging full price. So yeah, why wouldn't you do that? Drive top line revenue no matter where it's coming from.
By the way, we have somebody that's throwing some pretty awesome hot takes on LinkedIn here. And we can't see inside the program we're using who wrote this, but thank you for whoever is posting these hot takes, talking about customer acquisition retention. Oh yeah. Anyway, totally agree. If you can get the business to a certain level, right, it's just profitability. I work with a multi-unit restaurant in New York City, and they have a location that's literally like Times Square, and it's massive and it's big windows. And I walked in one day and I was like, man, your rent must be expensive. You know what they said to me? It's just a number.
It's
It's just
I agree.
it's just a number. If you can figure out the number, yeah. Okay, I want to go a little deeper here. Okay, I asked you, what's the most important thing you've learned? You said drive top line revenue. For brands that are going from 3 to 5 units or 6 to 10, like they're starting to grow, they're getting above 20. What's the difference that you've seen between those brands that leads to their success? Like for a brand going 3 to 5 or 6 to 10 or over 20, like what are they doing that's making that happen at a high level?
Sure. I think it's actually what I've seen is when they're smaller, less than 5 units, they're focusing on in the restaurant, they're focusing on products like food quality and customer service. That's what I'm seeing. By the way, the successful brands, those are the two things they're focusing on. Is my food, like again, fundamental table stakes? Is my food really good? Am I fine tuning my menu? Am I getting rid of the things that are, you know, going bad and contributing to my food waste that is sitting on the menu but that's not generating revenue, etc.? Is the food quality amazing? Is the customer service amazing? That's like less than 5. Once they're between that 6 to 10 unit, they're trying to figure out their operational and procedures, and they're trying to figure out their processes. And then once they get above 10, then by the way, like technology will play a role. Once you get above 6, then they're starting to think about technology. But once you're above 10, you better at that stage have your technology stack really ready, especially if you're trying to grow. You can't, I still know of franchisors that say, here's a recipe, good luck. Like I've been to conferences where multiple people have raised their hands and it's like, oh yeah, we made that mistake too. Oh yeah, we lost 10 grand trying to do that. Oh yeah, we lost 6 months trying to do this. It didn't work. And it's like, well, then what's the point of being in that group? What's the point of being in that franchisee group where you're having to learn it yourself and you're having to try to figure that out? So if you're trying to grow and add more locations, you have to have those things answered and you have to have those operation stuff figured out, the technology, the processes, the quality, the recipes, all that is got to be figured out. So again, food service first, then get into processes and technology stack, and then just double down on people. Once you're above 10, then you're looking at people and they're bringing in experts, the ones that have the experience that can actually execute and be individual contributors and lead at the same time, which is a really tall order.
Amen. Okay. So clearly the difference in growth is at some point, you're working on food and operations. Scalability happens with technology, right? I mean, that's sort of the point you're making. If a brand is in that like 3 to 5, 6 to 10, or going to 20, like they're trying to get to growth, maybe their tech stack is not right. We've already identified it's important. What would you say a brand needs to prioritize in their tech stack if they have that growth in mind? Like if they're trying to go big, what do they need to think about with a tech stack?
Great question. Let me see if I can prioritize one thing over the other. But I think ultimately you need to look at it from the revenue point of view. So from that aspect, what do I need? How do I get? Okay, let me reset. Retention. Like we all know, acquisition is expensive. Forget acquisition because it's just the least levered tool that you have in your toolbox. So focus on retention. And some people may say upsells, but I don't think upsells actually matter. Like I would not even, that's a cherry on top. It shouldn't be like focus, hey, let me just go figure that upsell because they're already in the restaurant. But let me give you a number on that. Let's say your average check is $25 per customer. And let's say you're trying to upsell them a $3 item or a $5 item. Well, if you want to increase your top line revenue by 150,000 and the upsell item is $3, guess what? You're going to have to upsell 50,000 customers in a year. 50,000 customers to get to 150,000. Versus if you focus on acquisition, or easier yet, focus on retention and bring customers back in at a $25 average spend, you're not having to deal with 50,000, you're dealing with 6,000 customers. So over a course of 12 months, you're definitely able to drive 6,000 of your customers to come back in and drive that $150,000 top line revenue. And by the way, out of 150,000, there should be 70% margins because your rent didn't go up, your labor cost probably didn't go up, because you could do 150,000 maintaining everything that you have except your variable cost, food cost. So what technology, what tools allows you to focus on retention? I would start with that and then figure out, all right, how do I drive retention? What do I need? Well, I need customer phone numbers and I need email addresses. Well, where do I get that from? Figure out where you can get that. If you're a quick service, different story. If you're a table service, different story. There's different sources you can gather that from, maybe waitlist reservation to the point of sale to online ordering, etc. And then figure out what you can do to make that data actionable. If you're just gathering a whole bunch of information and you're just letting it sit there, just don't even bother investing in that, because if it's not actionable, if it doesn't turn into cash, money in the bank, it doesn't matter. So it's very difficult to kind of prioritize which one you would do first, but I would focus on whatever that's going to give you the phone number, or whatever is going to give you the email addresses. And then if you can link that to the transactional data, oh my God, you've nailed it. Because then you're not making the same mistake of sending kids eat free to everybody Tuesday of the month when 70% of them don't have kids or something.
I just want to be clear to you and everybody that's listening to this, either live or on recording. I just asked a POS guy, and I'm taking a dramatic leap in calling you a POS guy. What is the most important thing to think about in a tech stack when you're looking at unit growth? And your answer was CDP functions. Now I know why you have an afro, because you're hiding your unicorn horn. You're like the only one that gets it. You're the only one. People call me all the time. Hey, Rev, we're going to replace our POS. What should we do? I ask one question. Okay, one.
Why?
What's more important? Well, yeah, why is for sure. But like when they want me to recommend somebody, I ask one question. What's more important, the transaction or the customer journey? Now, there is a correct answer, and most people give the wrong one.
Yeah,
It's
I
the
agree.
customer journey.
100%. By the way, like you have people that are using like integrated POS systems out there and they're still using it today. And to me, it's mind boggling because that POS is critical. It houses the most important information about your customer, the transactional data. That is why Uber Eats and DoorDash can charge you 30%. And I promise if they charge you 40% or if they charge you 50%, you'll still pay it. Why? Because they can take Rev and say, hey, Rev loves pizza, loves burgers. So now I can target advertising to you and I can maximize that lifetime value of Rev by funneling him to what he already likes and what his shopping behavior allows, or what his shopping behavior drives the revenue, right? But if they turn that data over to you as a restaurateur, you're probably not going to be able to do anything with it. So that customer journey, that transactional data is absolutely vital to success of any brand. And by the way, I've said this publicly and I'm going to repeat it again. By end of the decade, in the next 5 years, I will bet money on the line, there will be a few billion-dollar restaurateurs that will crush it on retention, and they'll build these massively, wildly successful retention engine in the restaurant space that is going to leave everybody wondering, how the hell did that guy do that? And the answer is going to be very simple. It's just retention.
I mean, amen. And this is a much easier for us to say this stuff, but like think like Amazon, right? If you have my information, how are you using it? It's pretty cut and dry, right?
Agreed.
Okay. At what point in the growth cycle, again, we're talking about restaurants going 3 to 6, 6 to 10, whatever. At what point in that growth cycle does the tech stack need to be evaluated?
I think once you pass the 5-unit mark, you need to reevaluate immediately, especially if you're trying to grow. Like if you've got 3, 4, 5 locations and you're happy, you're making your money and you don't want to grow anything, then great, keep it running for as long as you can. Because even if you don't, so the challenge there is the ones who will figure it out are going to put the ones that haven't figured it out of business. And by the way, like AI is so overrated. I don't want to get into that conversation. I think it's just a waste of time at the moment because there's nothing valuable there yet. But eventually it's just going like this right now. And eventually it'll just go like that. And then everybody who didn't figure it out is kind of left out. So I think the same thing is going to apply here. But if you're trying to grow, if you are intending and staying in business for the next decade, once you hit about 4 or 5 locations, it's time to evaluate that. And again, just sit down on paper and just figure out what's important. How do I get to the next stage? Well, I got to drive top line revenue. All right, how do I do that? Well, I could get new customers. All right, how do I do that? Advertise, yada, yada, yada. PPCs, social media, list goes on and on. How do I master retention? By the way, you should do all of them. I'm not saying don't do acquisition because you have to do acquisition for retention to work. So do acquisition channels, have a retention strategy, have a tactic there. So because it's going to cost you $50 to get a guest, well, you got to maximize lifetime value. And then also figure out what you can upsell and if there are room to do price increases. You got to do a combination of all. And then figure out which technology pieces you need to put in place. And in restaurants, you're probably going to have 15 different options and you've already got 10, 12 different technology tools that you need. So you're going to have like 200 different options. Now you got to try to figure out and filter through and which one's going to work. And that's why like our focus is one platform, one solution, everything works. It's seamless, no integration, none of that mumbo jumbo. But
okay, we have 4 minutes left on the show, and I definitely want to talk about what Milagro and Vivant does. But can you, in like 2 minutes, share with everybody like an awesome retention technique or strategy? Just at least one.
absolutely. So here's a great one.
I know you have a huge Rolodex. Pull one
No,
out.
no. Actually, this is easy. So John Taffer, Gary V, 7 years ago. So I want to repeat that 7 years ago. And I still haven't seen any restaurants execute on that. I ran across the YouTube some time ago, about 6-7 months ago. I'm like, this is genius. I'm going to build it in our system and I'm going to enable it for all of our customers. So here's what happens. By the way, you could do this on pen and paper, and you could manually do it, and then you can scale it with technology. We scaled it through technology. So you go in, you could put a red napkin. It's like, hey, is this your first time? Yes, it is. Red napkin on the thing. Everybody in the restaurant knows that first-time customer. Treat them better, right? Before they leave, it's like, hey, how was the food? It was amazing. How was service? Superb. Great. Next time you come in, buy one, get one free. You got to try this next chicken sandwich that we have. It's off the charts. Now you get them to come back in. They come in, put the chicken sandwich on the table. You know it's a second-time visitor. It's like, how was the chicken sandwich? Off the charts. Amazing. You got to try my cheesecake. Here's a free coupon for a cheesecake. So you give them a buy one, get one free. You give them a free cheesecake. On the third visit, you give them a free drink, something else. Now you're building behavior. Yes, it's costing you money, but long term, the LTV on that is just amazing. And by the way, I haven't seen anybody pull that off. So what we did, and actually there was another company, Seven Brews did that, and they did a hell of a job on that. So you come in right at the POS or waitlist reservation, etc. Phone number goes in the system. Can I get a phone number to get the order started? Great. Now the system identifies if it's a first time, second, third, fourth time visitors, and it automatically puts them in this marketing outreach that is the first time visitors, and it automates that whole process through technology.
So you're saying take the Taffer model, figure out how to drive 4 purchases as soon as possible.
He said it. He's like, you gotta, his exact words, you gotta market to 4 visits, not 1. Because if you market to 1, you're gonna lose.
Amen. All right. So anybody that's watching this live or is hearing the recording later, I want you to find Hamed on LinkedIn and ask him to send you the video if you can't find it. He'll just send you a link so you can go watch the video. All right, Hamed, we got 2 minutes left here. Tell people what Vivant and Milagro does.
All right, so Vivant, we eliminate internet outages, 0 outages. We don't allow the network internet to get in the way of you doing business. So we eliminate all the internet outages for businesses. So restaurants is one of our biggest verticals, healthcare, auto dealerships, etc. With Milagro, we're an all-in-one solution for the restaurants. So we focus on how do we drive retention, and every piece of technology that we have actually answers to that specific question. So we've got obviously the point of sale, reservation, online ordering, gift card, loyalty, all of that is built in, but it feeds into our CDP, which then triggers these automations. So when it's a first-time customer, it automatically sends them that buy one, get one free offer. The second time gives them the next offer, the dessert, appetizer, the free drink, etc., to drive more top-line revenue. And then another thing that we do on that side is the moment the customer leaves, gets a feedback. If it was positive, we route it to Google, Yelp to leave a 5-star review, and then escalate it internally if it's a negative review.
Awesome. So, like I said, POS guy with a full CDP.
You gotta get transactional history, and that is the only way to survive. And by the way, retention absolutely works. I have customers that have been with me for 20 years. They've been paying me on a monthly basis for the last 20 years. So trust me, retention is the name of the game. You could have a smaller company, like smaller customer base, but still drive meaningful revenue just by mastering customer retention.
I love it. Okay, everybody, again, if you're listening to us live, you're maybe on LinkedIn, just click over and say hi to Hamed in the DMs. If you're hearing the podcast as a recording, LinkedIn, probably the best way to find you.
Absolutely, yeah, on LinkedIn, and I'll send you that John Taffer video. It's freaking mind blowing. I probably have shared it 150 times, and I probably listened to it like 10 or 15 times myself.
I mean, legit, you and I watched it preparing for the show. So
We in fact did.
yeah, if you're listening to the show, don't go search for it. Just find Hamed on LinkedIn and he'll send it to you. Okay. Thank you for joining us today, everybody. Please jam the subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you like to listen in. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks, Rev. Thank you, everybody.